Welcome, Buff fans. Another episode of the Primetime Night Owls. And Matt, our last show we actually did very, very late because we were going over the scenarios of the Big 12. But this one, as usual, we're doing the afternoon. But um, we are night owls, so here we are. But
Yeah.
Matt, we're in the final week of the regular season, and for the first time in a while, we're going to talk about a Buffs loss, and then preview obviously the game against Oklahoma State. But um, you know, we've already gone through all the scenarios in a previous video, so go watch that. Matt and I are not going to go over that today because we spent 15 minutes doing that on late Saturday night, and nothing has changed on their scenarios. So let's just
Maybe a
kind of
synopsis. Maybe a synopsis, a little summary at the end when we get there.
yeah. So let's for now let's talk about Kansas because that game was one that you know it was one that we talked about last week that you've got to be a little worried about it because the way had been playing, and it was not the same KU team that started 1-5 that they were playing much better, and certainly the KU we saw at Arrowhead on Saturday was not the KU that we watched the first half of the season. They really kind of defensively dominated the Buffs.
Yeah, I was totally wrong about this game. On my channel, I even put out a video on Friday night. It felt like coming into that one, CU was the alpha in the
Mhm.
conference, and they did not come out and play like it. And I think there's a couple of reasons behind it, certainly, and we'll address them, but they definitely got dominated. I just finished watching the game back, and man, that just I even probably was a little bit too hard on some of the coaching that was done. I think even in my post game video, I think I said, there were some times where they were out coached defensively. They just could not execute. I mean,
Yeah.
they couldn't. And when Coach Prime told us in the post game, Rob called a good game, he did. They were in position so
Yeah.
many times, but so many missed tackles that we had not really seen since the last time they lost, which was all the way back on October 13th against Kansas State. They have not lost in over a month, which is why I think it's even a little bit more jarring is they've been playing must-win football for over a month, and they've been spotless pretty much since that blown opportunity at home. And so because of that game, and look, we can play the hypothetical plenty of different ways, but because of that game, you just did not have any more margin for error, really. And it's kind of biting them right now with the position they're in. They're
Yeah.
probably a little bit lucky to even have an open door chance at a Big 12 appearance, in the title game. So yeah, Brian, it was incredibly disappointing. And the one thing I said last week was I had an inkling that at some point before the end of the year they were going to be tested in a way that we didn't foresee, and that came by way of a complete defensive breakdown on
Yeah.
Saturday in Kansas City.
Yeah, and frankly, something we haven't seen all year. I mean, even the Nebraska game, and I asked Coach Prime this after the game. I was like, you guys had not looked like that since first half of Nebraska. This was even worse than that because the first half of
Yeah.
Nebraska, they're down 28-0, but Nebraska had a pick six, and you also had the interception that went the non-interception that went through the hands of I think it was Bentley
Yeah.
that Nebraska scores on. Now, like they legitimately scored three touchdowns, but Nebraska did not do to Colorado what KU was doing. So
Nope.
that's what surprised me was how thoroughly dominant. I mean, what I wrote last week and whatever it was writing and talking about with Colorado was they are imposing their will physically, and they have become kind of the alpha, like you said, like that bully, to where they can out physical teams, and that simply didn't happen the other day. And I think that's one of the biggest surprising things. I think a lot of times for fans, I think the most disappointing thing is that it almost felt like this team was a team of destiny, and like everything's falling their way, and all they got to do is keep winning. And it was almost this foregone conclusion that they were going to take care of that part and get through. Not by us, but I think for a lot of people. And so it was jarring to see them look like that. But frankly, I know you've gone back and watched it. I have not yet. Um, I'm just stunned by how defensively they were so bad because they have not looked like that all year. What did you see when you went back and watched it?
Yeah, a lot of it was missed tackles because there were a lot of situations where they're arriving to the play, they're just not making it.
Yeah,
And that's tough. The other part of it is when you look at their last two losses, Kansas State and Kansas, they do a couple things very similarly. They both have very good offensive schemes. And I think one thing to me that was apparent in watching this, one team's offensive scheme is on the leading edge and one team's is relying on their quarterback heavily. And that's a
Yeah,
topic I want to get into a little bit with you later. But Kansas did such a good job of using their personnel. They have tight ends that can actually block on the edges, which Colorado does not have. And if the Buffs want to get serious about running the football moving forward into the future, they have to bring a few of these guys into the program. You watch these guys dominate in the running game and then become weapons in the passing game. It just changes the overall outlook of what you can do offensively because of the
yeah,
versatility that you possess. And so you've got a couple of dogs on the outside who were just blocking Colorado's edges. I think, there were a lot of situations where the Buffs didn't really get pushed back by KU's offensive line, but they weren't doing a good enough job collapsing the pocket. And when they
hmm,
did, Daniels has the ability to make plays with his feet, which is also where Colorado could not wrap up. They couldn't wrap up Neal and they couldn't wrap him up. He broke a bunch of tackles too. And, credit to them. The one thing I'll say about this is it's a common theme now. And it's something that I was thinking maybe I'd ask Coach Prime about because I think it's an interesting dilemma from a coaching philosophy perspective. You are every team's Super Bowl, okay? However, from a talent perspective, you do not far outweigh everyone else. You may have more than everyone, but it's not so overwhelming to the point where it's a complete disadvantage the moment other teams step on the field, right? You still have
yeah,
to execute, you still have to do your job. But here's the difference. These other teams are coming to the games, especially on the road. We've seen this year. They're coming into these games so keyed up in the first quarter that
hmm,
they set a tone. Now,
yeah,
Colorado has done a really good job this year erasing that and coming back. And they almost did against Kansas, but this time they let the hole get to 17-0, which is the biggest hole that they've been in while really attempting to make a comeback. And so while they did score 21 points in 19 minutes, which by average is good, sometimes the shape of the game changes. And when another team can set the tone so fervently on the road, I didn't really have any worries they were going to be able to erase it against Texas Tech because it was only 13. But even at 17, I sent out a message on social media. I said, well, if they can dig themselves out of 17-0, I will be thoroughly impressed because that's a deep
yeah,
hole. And they almost did it. And they almost did it. So while I understand where Coach Prime is coming from in that saying that 21 points in 19 minutes, you can't really argue with that. The problem is they cannot get out of the starting blocks clean this year. And sometimes in these types of games late in the year, they're going to be shootouts. And the test would have been a complete defensive breakdown. But hey, can you adapt and can your offense generate enough? And unfortunately, by the time that you had a chance, you didn't get the football back enough. But if you would have started out on a better note, I think that the game maybe changes. Now, there was the missed holding on Travis, which was egregious, which might change the drive. And in my opinion, was the one call that could change the game. By and large, you just have to be able to do things a little differently. And did they lose because they had a complete defensive breakdown? Kansas didn't punt one time and they scored every drive up until the last one. Yeah, of course. But if you are able to maybe set a better tone in this, where you don't have to dig out of it, maybe the outlook of the game changes a little bit. So for me, it's strange because you also don't want to key your team up to where they gas themselves out, right?
right.
Normally, you kind of want to have that 12-round boxer approach where you kind of let them tire themselves out, and then we come in with the second half haymaker. The problem is the defense never woke up. And if, sorry, I know I'm going on here, but I put a bunch of pieces together over the last 24 hours. You remember Cam telling us early in the year that one of the big reasons they were able to make second half adjustments, I think it might have been North Dakota State, was because they just clicked in and woke up. Like he's like, I don't know that we really did anything differently. It was just that we started really going for it. Something happened where they just didn't have the juice defensively and they were not the aggressors. And Kansas put on a run blocking clinic. Part of it had to do with their versatility, part of it had to do with their scheme, but they really kicked Colorado's ass up and down the field. They did.
Yeah, and yeah, you're right. I mean, offensively, it's interesting because they average 7.3 yards a play, which is the
Right.
best this season since North Dakota State. They averaged 8.8 against North Dakota State. 7.3 is the best since then. So you look at it, they ran 42 plays which is 15 less than any other game this season, and they had over 300 yards. I look at that and I say, offense, I'm fine,
Yeah.
except for, like you said, the beginning. And so, yes, you're right in that if you if it's not 17 nothing, and I'm fine with a 3 and out here and there. There's things like they had a shot down 10 nothing, and they've got 3rd and 1 at the 39-yard line, and they run 2 straight plays up the middle with Dallin Hayden. And love Dallin. He's not the guy I want in that spot if you're going to run it 2 times in a row. And I think especially 3rd down, if you go 3rd and 1 and you run Hayden and it's a 2-yard loss, now it's 4th and 3, don't run him again. Now put it in the hands of Shadeur Sanders. I didn't like that sequence there. I also would have gone Micah Welch, but that sequence there, Matt, if you keep that going, and even if you put 3 on the board, I think that changes a lot, and so that's the only thing with the offense. Like, for the most part, I was fine with the offense. I mean, 7.3 a play. You didn't have the ball a whole lot. You're going to have some 3 and outs typically. Now, Kansas didn't, but in a normal game, you're going to have 3 and outs and not score every drive. But I think that there was, to your point, like there was some timely misses on offense. I think that one right there, I didn't mind the first 3 and out, like whatever. But the second drive was the one that they missed the 4th and 2. Well, I think it was 4th and 3. And then by the time you got the ball the third time, you're down 17 nothing already. And credit them. They did a nice job making it 23-21 early in the third. And I will give the defense credit on this. 3 times they held KU to field goals, which was key. That at least was their little part of saying, all right, offense, we're sort of keeping us in this for you. But yeah, just all in all, just not a good recipe.
And normally we're used to them kind of turning the tides defensively with maybe a bit of a slower start, because Texas
Yeah.
Tech did the same thing. They marched right down the field, scored very similarly to how Kansas did. It was like a carbon copy. That was the most their crowd was into it all game long, and they were
Yeah.
just so keyed up for the moment. And so that was kind of what I was saying, is that you miss some of those early opportunities. You bring up the short yardage. Their short yardage packages in general, it's kind of what I'm talking about in the scheme wise. They're really struggling there. They've had some nice moments. I actually love the philosophy of, if you don't get it 3rd and 1, run it 4th and 1, but they did it out of shotgun. Like, they're doing some of the things that they
Yeah,
did
but
earlier in the. Go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
I would agree with you, except that it wasn't 3rd and 1, then 4th and 1. It was 3rd and 1, you lost 2, and now it's
Right.
4th and 3.
I understand, but they were trying to go, and it was a cover 2 look, and Kansas is daring them to run the football, Brian. The bigger problem here is that we're 2 years in, and you've got an offensive line that can't buy you those situations, not
Right.
even occasionally. Like that, let's just call it what it is now. When you need a yard, you still cannot rely on this offensive line to get you that yard. And
Right.
that's a huge problem still. And I think because of that, you want to be able to do that. Normally, I really don't have that big of an issue 4th and 3 when they're sitting in cover 2. But because of what you just mentioned, you have not demonstrated an ability to do it yet, especially not with Dallin doing it again. And Dallin, if you look at that play, like, Jordan doesn't block anybody. Dallin could cut it outside and get that, at least have a better shot at it, but he kind of cuts it up into it's a breakdown up front is the point.
Yeah.
And so he's doing the best he can. The point is that their short yardage. There was another one with 6 minutes left in the third quarter. It's a 3rd and 1. They're in shotgun because, as you mentioned, they just showed that they're not getting the yard. We just talked about it. So they
Yeah.
run this like little kind of shtick play where I think it was designed for like a little under screen for Legionte, but it's blown up instantly, and everybody else is so far down the field that you have no other options, and Shadeur gets sacked on 3rd and 1. These are the kinds of things I'm talking about. You'll notice Daniels did a great job with those little mini inside slants that picked up like 6 or 7. You know what I'm talking about? Like, it's like,
Mhm.
hey, CU's either dropping back or they're in that man. I can get that look every time. And they were getting that look every time. Colorado doesn't do a lot of that stuff. A lot of it is at behind the line of scrimmage, which I understand speed and space, but you need some quick picker uppers. And I think they struggle a little bit with that schematically. Whereas Kansas, they'll bring Grimm into the backfield, and here's this tight end into the backfield. They're motioning this guy across the formation. Now it's Neal who's getting the wildcat. Like they're not afraid to get creative, and there's just a lack of ingenuity from Colorado's perspective. And since we're on this topic and we're talking about these situations, I just want to make sure that we recognize how much Shadeur does for this team.
Mhm.
Like if you head into next year thinking that you can do things the same way and still be okay, I think they might be in for a little bit of a rude awakening, even though Juju's a really good player. Shadeur covers up for so much. A lot of these plays happen when things break down.
Yeah.
And so I just want to make sure that we recognize that when you've got one of those guys, it changes everything. So when I said last week that maybe there's a way they're going to have to change some things, the way they handle things, the way they recruit, the positions they're looking for, the scheme moving
Right.
forward, it's because of my ultimate respect for him and what he can do. And so I just don't want to think we can carbon copy here the plan from 24 to make it work moving forward. And I don't think they will. I think they'll recognize that, but it was very clear to me that Kansas knew what they wanted to do. And I was talking behind the scenes with somebody who spoke to their OC last week, and they weren't concerned at all that Colorado was going to be able to stop them from rushing the football for 4 downs, and they proved to be right. And
Yeah.
that's clearly exposing a weakness that the Buffs have, because Colorado's been one of the better rush defenses in the back, in the Big 12 this year,
Yeah.
especially here of late.
Yeah. And I'll also say this. They haven't been a great run defense. They've been a nice solid run defense. They were pretty bad on Saturday. And to your point on Shadeur, I totally agree with you. Mike Gundy today was asked about Shadeur and like how does he compare to like what you guys have faced, and Gundy said, he's the most dangerous guy that we faced all year. And
Easy.
he talked about some other guys, like Avery Johnson at K-State. He does some things you have to worry about. But with Shadeur, he's like this guy's just so good at, he can run with the ball, but he can run to his left and throw the ball. And he said most guys like that, when they go to their left, he can run to the right and throw the ball. Most guys like that, they go to the left, they can't. He goes, well, he can. He can make plays in all sorts of ways. And so, and we know this, but it's interesting hearing a coach kind of describe it that way. Like that's why he's most dangerous. And that's, to your point, what separates Shadeur from even what a 17-year-old Juju is probably going to look like. Is that as talented as he is, can he do that yet at 17 years old? Because, and I'm not knocking him at all, because
No,
I'm
this
not
isn't a
sure.
criticism of him.
I mean, how many quarterbacks in the country can do what Shadeur does? Zero. Right. And so, yeah, it's such a luxury to have a guy like that. That's why, though, on that 4th and 3, I want it in
Put it in
Shador's
his
hands.
hands. Put it in his hands.
I
I
want it in
don't
his
disagree.
hands. And
I don't
and it's
disagree.
like when you just tried it on 3rd and 1 and you get stuffed for a loss, fine. Shadeur, do a quick hit out to LeJonte or Travis, whatever. Let's get these 3 freaking yards and let's go.
Yeah.
And that's what they needed to do. And there's times, Coach Prime at times has done that. And last year they would do it, and he's like, "Look, I trust it in his hands." And a lot of times people say, "Oh yeah, he's your son," but you watch it like, well, yeah, that's the guy you want. You want the ball in his hands. And
But I just want to make sure that we highlight, like, I'm pretty sure it was his call on that 3rd and 1 to even check to the run. He's making the right reads. The
yeah,
the overarching problem here is Colorado still doesn't have the line that can get it done in short yardage
yes,
situations.
right,
And so we're on the same page here. Considering your limitations, you'd rather have the ball in his hands there. But the
yeah,
real problem here is that 2 years in, and look, I don't know if any of us really expected them 2 years in to have a road grading line. So I want to make sure that it doesn't come off as it's like, well, you should have that by now. That's not
yeah,
an easy thing to develop. Okay. Neither one of us are saying that. And
hmm
I'm really not criticizing them for not having done it, but there's still a reason why you're kind of being held back in some of those situations. And I think, we bring that up because it's not what lost them the game,
right,
but it was a way that could have won them the game, or at least helped them compete in that type of a game. And it was maybe a couple weeks in the making, in my opinion.
yeah,
Like, your defense had come through in such dramatic ways on the road in Arizona, right? At home against Cincinnati, on the road in Lubbock. And then who they play last Utah, same thing against
Yeah.
Utah. They were really good. They turned the football over. But if we look back at those games, if the defense didn't generate those takeaways or make some of those massive plays, those would have been tight ball games because CU has had real struggles at times offensively. And
Yeah.
so it almost felt like something I've been harping on. Your weaknesses will get exposed at the end of the year. It's just a matter of time. And that's why, and they just haven't buttoned those things up.
Yeah.
And more so, they've almost regressed because the last three games, they have not at all been able to run the football,
Yeah.
at least
And
in those areas.
honestly, CU is sort of a case study in the fact that it's very hard to build an offensive line quickly, because what did they do? And
Period.
we highlighted it, and we praised them quite a bit, and they did a nice job. I mean, they went out and they did revamp it, and they went out and they got Jordan Seaton. They go out and they get 9 transfers in the offensive line, right? And that's awesome.
They're
But
significantly better from last year.
they're better.
Significantly.
But again, it's not that road grading line, right? And so you look at it and say, how many of those 9 transfers are full-time starters? One. And he just got hurt.
Right.
Philip Houston, who was
Right.
not the one of the 9 that you would have thought would be when you looked at the 9, would you have projected Philip Houston as a starter this year? No.
Never.
And so
No.
he's the one, and he didn't even start the first game of the year. So basically, Philip Houston's been your one of the 9 transfers has been a full-time starter. He now might be done for the year. Uh, you know, Khalil Benson, Justin Mayers have been solid at times, but they've rotated at guard, and you've got a freshman walk-on center now. You've got Seaton's awesome. He's a freshman left tackle, and Tyler Brown was a transfer last year. But my point is, even going out and getting a whole bunch of linemen through the portal, and even guys that were starters other places, you still didn't find an offensive line that you would rate as a top end offensive line in the Big 12, let alone
No.
in the
No.
country. And so it's going to take some time, and I'll be interested to see what they can do this next offseason. And that's a bigger topic for later on, but what they can do this offseason, because this next quarterback, whether it's Juju or whoever, needs a better offensive line what they have right now, because to your point earlier, Shadeur makes up for a lot of that. This next quarterback may not be able to do what Shadeur can do to make up for that offensive line.
I just got off the phone with somebody who knows football and has been in football his entire life and said almost the exact same thing, that you need at least 3 legit offensive linemen for next year. You can't fool
Yeah.
around because you're going to have a freshman, and they look, it's not easy. So again, I don't want to be it does I really want to make sure we're not coming off like, hey, you failed at this. It's not easy to get it right. Most good offensive linemen don't hit the portal. Let's call
Right.
it what it is. Finding good linemen is not an easy thing to do. And hopefully the guys that are in your program develop another year in your program, because they are a first year with load hold, right? And
Yeah.
you did try and have to kind of piece all these guys together, and they have done better. Like, I want to say that, considering that they can't run the football, they have done much better. Like, I've got a note here. Got to give CU's offensive line some credit in these passing situations, because the other part of it is Shadeur doesn't make their life easy sometimes either. He
Mhm.
scrambles a lot longer and keeps some plays alive a lot longer than like 99% of quarterbacks would. And in those moments, you're really hanging your line out to dry at times, because it's not easy to block for that long. And it's just part of his game, and obviously
Yeah.
part of what makes him great at times, but also it's hard to block for that. And when you're not ever running the football and you're sitting in passing situations all the time. So I do want to give them a little bit of slack, because the way that they're doing things is also challenging. But the point remains the same, that 2 years in, it started to look like there was some progress being made with their run scheme, but that stuff has been solved. The Savell Smalls motion to the, inline, where then you snap it and run out of 11, like, people see that on film. Shermer did a really good job coming up with ways that they could figure out how to run the ball. They just have struggled to figure out others, if that
Yeah.
makes sense,
Yeah.
because those got solved. And then after that, they really haven't had go-tos. And it was clear watching Kansas. It's like, well, they're doing 15 different things,
Mhm.
and so when I say out coach, it's like, Well, from a scheme standpoint, at least to me, and this person I just spoke to as well, who I have a lot of respect for, played in the NFL, was like, yeah, I mean, it's obvious when you watch,
Yeah.
two is covering up for a lot. So moving forward, so we're harping on that all the while still recognizing that CU is 8-3, probably should be 9-2 because you probably should have beat Kansas State in my mind, and then you would have had margin for error for a stinker, but you don't. So now you need some help. Um,
Real quick,
it's yeah,
can I just add to you mentioned, I want to second you that I don't think they failed with the offensive
no,
line additions. I think they did a good job of upgrading the offensive line. It's just hard, you know.
it's hard.
Yeah.
It's the hardest thing to do there is.
Yeah.
I mean, every year, every staff, we see the same thing, especially, and I think part of it now is like, there's such a wave of, trying to be healthy in this country that being an offensive lineman is not an easy thing to do to keep up that much weight. There's a lot of
Mhm.
pressure now with image and especially with what we know about taking care of our body that being that big of a human being at that big of a weight, you just don't have as many guys that are trying to do that as you
Yeah.
used to, at least in my opinion. And so, it's not as easy to find them. I think things have changed a little bit in football.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what they get in the portal. Uh, they got to hit that hard, and
Hard.
you've got to try to find. And again, these guys don't jump in the portal often, but you got to try to find all conference. I mean, it's sort of, you look at the progression, right? And we'll move off offensive line, but I want to say this real quick. The first year under Coach Prime, they went and got some guys in the portal that maybe were FCS guys and JUCO guys and Power Five backups that didn't have any experience. This last year, they went out and got some FBS starting guys, right? I almost feel like the
Mm-hmm.
next level is now go get some all conference type of guys. And there's not a lot out there, but
Yeah.
if you can find, and you don't need five of them, because you already got a left tackle. If Cash and Zelenskis are still here, you're probably okay at center. Justin Mayers can come back. No, I think it's Khalil Benson can come back. So get two. If you can get two all conference type offensive linemen, um, maybe that's
Unless
maybe
they land Smith and Carroll. If they land Smith and Carroll, that would be, I would love that too. I mean, you got two huge, really exciting prospects for the next couple of years.
yeah,
If
but
they went
again,
on that type of a
that's
development,
but if you did
yeah,
that though, and let's say it's Seton Smith, Carroll, and Cash, now your offensive line is all either
I
true
know.
freshmen or true sophomores, and
You got to, I mean, Juju's young too. Like,
yeah, I know.
I hear your point, but at the same time, you got to develop. What I mean, see, I think next year isn't about the overall win total. It's about resetting everything because people. I just want to make sure people understand how much Shadeur and Travis cover up. Like, if
Yeah,
they didn't have Travis, as good as Shadeur was, and he was great, I probably didn't give him as much credit too because I have such a high standard for him. But I'm rewatching that game back, and in the third quarter, there's 6 minutes left. He's 17 and 19 for 206 and three
mhm,
touchdowns. How much more is he really supposed to do while also
right,
taking a hit that probably should have ended maybe his career if
yeah,
if we're being honest, if his leg was planted there on that no call, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So like I'm with you, but I also don't mind a development project when you're talking about guys with that type of distinction coming in. You're probably not going to be competing for a title next year, in my opinion. It would be
right,
surprise. It would be unbelievably impressive if they were, but there's going to be a lot of turnover. Maybe they can. I'm not ruling it out. I mean, we have no idea what they're going to do. My point is that now is the opportunity if Coach Prime is planning on staying for multiple years, which we now know that that's the case. I mean, you don't go get Juju. I mean, I guess you could, but I really don't believe
well,
that to be the case.
we now believe, I wouldn't say we
Believe that to
know,
be the
we now
case.
believe that to be the case.
Yeah, I think that that's his plan. Unless things change, you never know.
Right.
Things could change. I just think that's his plan. And so if you're going to do that, I don't mind that route either. I really don't. And understand there may be some ups and downs. And that's just one thing. We'll wrap up the talk on the O line there, but something that I think has been building, and they've kind of been getting away with to a degree because of how talented they are outside skill positions and how good this defense has been playing. But
Yeah.
now that they lost, and now that they're going to have a tough time making it just makes sense moving forward to go, okay, well, this is what they've learned, or at least you and I have learned after 2 years about what the best path forward would be, or at least some alterations that probably need to be at
Right.
least investigated.
Yeah. So let's I mean, we can probably move off the KU game because obviously it was
I got a couple
if you got
other
a couple
things I
other
wanted
things,
to.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just quickly. The officiating, I understand everybody talking about the officiating. That guy, that head ref, and I'll just be on my soapbox here. Every year I turn on college football and he is at the center of one of these games. He was the guy who Mark Harlan, Utah's athletic director, called out a little bit earlier in the season, then got fined $40,000 for doing so by the conference.
Yeah.
Officiating is, in fact, a problem in all of sports right now. And these
Yeah.
leagues don't want to hold officials accountable because it threatens the integrity of the game and it would
Mhm.
force more fans to question the integrity of the game. But I think that it would actually have the opposite effect if they started to hold officials accountable and be more transparent about it. Is it easy to officiate games? Hell no. These guys are moving 100 miles an hour, especially in football, and you got 11 guys on each side of the football. It is not easy. I'm the first one to acknowledge that. That's why I don't talk about it. However, when there are established patterns, and I'm using this gentleman as an example because, I mean, you can go around the Big 12 and ask every single fan base, and I promise you that they had a moment with him.
Yeah.
Why is that not addressed?
Right.
That should be addressed. There's not you're protecting those guys, but at the same time, don't you want fans to have some trust in your sport? Like, again, you miss a roughing call like that, and what message is that sending to your consumer? I don't
Right.
understand that part of it. And again, I don't want to make it seem like I'm whining or anything. It's just a broader conversation because it's affecting every sport right now, a true lack of accountability. And so I've gotten, and as I'm sure you have, a lot of fans going, God, what about the refs? The refs were horrible.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
the refs haven't been great. They haven't. But right now, under the current system, there is no way for officials to be held accountable, or at least to do so and make that public knowledge. And I
Yeah.
think that that's an alteration we need to take as a sports community. We need to shift the way that we look at that because I think more transparency in officiating would actually lend to, you know, uh, maybe more trust. Although to be fair, the NBA did the last 2 minute report, and it's like, well, the game's over now. Oh, he blew the call.
Yeah.
Does it make you feel better that he blew the call? So it's a tough one to really. It's a tricky
It's
situation.
tough, but I mean that play right there was egregious. I mean that was to
I
me
know.
that was targeting. It's lowering the head and launching yourself, below the knee or at the knee of Shadeur. Um, to me that's the type of play, Matt, that in my opinion, if it's in the NFL, they come back and review it and they find that guy. Even
Mm,
if there wasn't a penalty at the time, he probably gets a fine for that type of hit. I thought that was
I would
pretty
agree.
bad. There's also and there's officiating misses in every single game, right? But
Every game.
an unfortunate one was there was the run by Jalen Daniels that the official actually gets in Travis's way, and Travis might have made a tackle there and makes that a short gain, but instead the official knocks down Travis and it's a long gain for Jalen Daniels. Um, yeah, on officiating, I don't know if it's necessarily this guy's crew. I mean, the crew at Texas Tech, that was the worst officiated game I've seen in
Yeah,
a long
that's true.
time. They
Yeah.
they lost control of that thing. But there's now been a few games like that. So officiating is tough. But there's also, I'll just get to this because we were talking about beforehand. People have talked about the play where Shadeur clearly shoves an official. They saw it on TV. I think it was Mike Perea was on the broadcast saying Shadeur was lucky he didn't get ejected there because you're not supposed to do that. And yeah, that's not a good look for Shadeur. Um, I think it was Sports Illustrated wrote he could face a suspension. I've talked to some people today. That's not going to happen. But you know, there's just a lot of things going on, and
Hmm.
that happened because it's a reaction over, you watch that whole thing and KU is just sitting there, they're kind of kneeing him in the head and they're doing all these things. It's the officials losing control of it, and that's what led to that type of situation. And so yeah, it was not a great situation.
I like what you just said. Losing control. We've been a part of a few games this year covering it where it's clear that the officials have lost control.
Yeah.
And that's where you probably, as an official, should face repercussions. Because at the end of the day, you miss a couple of calls, okay. But if you end up losing control, and it was I don't know if they fully lost control of this game, but it was getting pretty bad.
Yeah.
And
It
at a
was it wasn't
certain
Texas
point,
Tech bad.
no, it
Yeah.
wasn't Texas Tech bad. But at the same time, your number one priority should be player safety.
Yeah.
And I think that at times that's been skirted this year, which is just like, okay, everybody's so charged up to play Colorado. Somebody has to be defending them. Like, it's a
Yeah.
little bit of a double standard to just go, you're on your own in some of these situations. As a league, as a crew, you should understand what you're about to deal with when you call a Colorado game. And
Right.
unfortunately, it's probably not unique to the Buffs that there are some obviously bad situations and bad blown calls, but
Right.
to the degree that other opposing fans have been charged up, to the degree that some games have gotten a little chippy, it may not have been what football used to be back in the day. It may look like powder puff compared to that. But the fact is, under the modern game, there definitely should have been a better job tightening the screws on some of this stuff. Undoubtedly. The other thing I'm going to say is the one thing we have not seen Colorado do to try and counteract that is to try and do the same stuff. Like at Texas Tech, they were running basketball screens. We did
Mhm.
not see Colorado then go, oh, that's how you're going to call it? Great. We're going to do the exact same thing. And then if it's called, then you make your point to the official because it's a
Yeah.
double down and it's easy to point out. Like that didn't happen. And I think that's the right way. It's almost like Tad Boyle not fouling up three, right? It's the right way. You want to do the right thing. But sometimes, hey man, let's take it out of their hands. And it's like, hey, if
Yeah.
that's the way you're gonna call it, you better be calling it the same way both ways. And so I would I would say that in the future, if that happens, because it feels like it's happened a couple of times this year. Hey, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and give it a shot. Because and if you get that flag, that's when you make your point and you
Yeah.
can blow your top. And I think that's when you can drive it home, just from a coaching perspective of how to work the refs. That's one thing I've always been like, okay, well, if they're gonna allow that, try it.
Yeah.
And if they call your flag on it, I mean, light this guy up like a Christmas tree. I don't know what else to say. Let's see, just a few other things. Um, the one thing that you and I got yelled at by fans early in this year was the running back room, Brian. Remember when we talked about in the preseason? At least I was firmly saying, I am not sold about this room.
Yeah.
By the end of the year, I feel justified in what I have said.
And
Okay.
what and what
And I
I
feel just,
said, what I said was, I that's the one place I don't know if they got better. I
yes,
didn't think they were worse, but I didn't think I wasn't sure if they got better. And here we
they're
are. I'm like,
worse.
you
They're
think they're
worse.
worse?
I do.
Okay.
Hankerson and Edwards, I mean, they may not be, dominant or starting in other places, but I mean, they produced more than Colorado's running backs this year.
Yeah.
Let's just call it what it is. So I actually happen to think if Hankerson was here, they'd have a better running game, but it's not because of I don't distrust Isaiah Gustive. That's just I think Hankerson's a good player, and they
I
need
was
a
a
guy
big
who can really
Hankerson fan. I loved him when he came in 22.
he could really maneuver between tackles, and they need a
Yeah.
guy like that who can pick up some short yardage, situations. They don't really have that guy at the moment, especially after Augustive got hurt. They need, in my opinion, and this may not be a popular one, so get mad at me if you want to. They need pretty close to a complete overhaul again in that room. In my opinion, they can disagree. It's not a criticism of them. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. Hayden, I think, was a good thought. I don't see much of a future. Maybe they do. Augustive, I think, can be a part of the mix, and Micah Welch promises to be maybe something. But again, I just think if you're going to have a real rushing attack next year, you're probably going to have a couple of different guys that aren't in the program right now carrying the rock. Just my opinion.
Yeah. I wouldn't disagree with you. I like Welch. I'd like to see what he can do when healthy and with a year under his belt. I wouldn't give up on him. And Isaiah, I like what he can do sometimes too. Um, I, I think they'd look better with a better offensive line. Honestly, I think it goes back to that. But I also think when you're looking in the portal again, Matt, I was talking about offensive line, right? It's kind of a progression of what they've picked up. FCS guys initially, then it's okay. We got some Power Five starters, and that
Mm,
now you need the all conference guys, in my opinion. Running back wise, go
mm.
find yourself a guy that's done it.
Yeah.
Okay. And like Dallin
Not
Hayden,
easy again. Not
like
easy
not
again.
easy, but I think it's easier than offensive line. I mean, you almost had the
Yeah,
guy.
that's true.
I mean, Rashad Amos was committed here. Um, I haven't seen what he's done. Where did he end up? Ole Miss. But
Yeah, I couldn't tell
remember, he
you.
was the Ball State guy that had 1,000 yards, and you know,
Uh-huh.
Dallin Hayden again. It's like there was a lot of people excited because he rushed for 500 yards at Ohio State a couple years ago as a backup. Um, I think running behind Ohio State's offensive line. I'm not saying it's easy to rush for 500 yards, but it's different than running behind this one. I would,
Yes.
if I'm them, I go find a running back. I would find some offensive lines that are not very good and see, all right, did they have a running back that looked good despite that? And go get a guy that can run the ball despite not having the great offensive line. And then, and go get a guy that's already rushed for a lot of yards. Those guys are going to transfer. The FCS ranks, those guys that have got 1,000+ yards are going to transfer. The Mac, I mean, look at who was the kid from oh my gosh, where was he last year? He's at UCF now, Penny Boone, right?
Yeah.
He was at, dang, where was he at last year? Kent, maybe. But 1,400 yards rushing last year. He was willing to give that up and go to be a backup at UCF. It hasn't worked out great for him, but go find a guy like that has done it and has been productive and proven himself. That's what I'd like to see them get.
Sure. I mean, look, I just they need to upgrade the talent level in that room
Yeah.
moving forward. Without
Mhm.
Shadeur, you have to, especially. And you and I really haven't talked about Juju's commitment at all. But moving forward, the two things that you have to give him if you want him to have success immediately, and he's a great player. I watched his game against Valdosta the other night. He shredded him.
Yeah, he's pretty
Okay.
good.
Shredded
Yeah.
him. Now, I talked to some guys who understand a little bit more about what Georgia high school football looks like, and they said the tougher matchups are coming. Like this week's matchup is going to be more challenging than Valdosta was, but Valdosta's a good program. That being said, I mean, they shredded him. Now, he also had I think it was three deep balls in man coverage that he just threw it up there. Great timing routes, but you probably aren't going to get as much of that, in college as you did in high school. So you're going to need to, and he runs the RPO more. I mean, you're going to be able to run the football more with him than you will with Shadeur. I just think that you've got to give him, what system I would look to try and model with Juju is Oregon. I really would. What the stuff that Oregon does, the RPO, the quick game, all that running, and Oregon's always got a couple of backs they feed through there, and it's like they never miss a beat. So it's gonna be interesting to see what it looks like moving forward. They just got to prioritize it. The last thing I'll say, linebacker depth moving forward. I don't know what the deal is with Jeremiah Brown or Trevor Woods. I don't think either one of us do. I think maybe we expect both of them back at the moment.
Yeah.
But beyond that, we talked a little bit about how if they had to get tested there because those guys decided to redshirt, it could be a little bit of a problem. Jalen Wester stepped up and he did make some plays in the UCF game, I believe it was, and maybe the Baylor game. There were a couple early in the year where he played okay. He did have the penalty um, on Saturday, and he did miss a tackle right in the backfield. He was right there. So, it was like, man, if you're going to be without Bentley, and I think Bentley was dealing with something. He was laid out to warm ups too. So
Yeah.
we'll see. It's just they're going to need to recruit. If they can get Owusu Boateng, that 5-star from IMG, that kid he is stacked. I mean, he is built. That is the
Yeah.
type of guy as a freshman you think might be able to contribute day one. So we'll see what happens. They need some depth there. And shout out to Keaton Wade. There were a couple of missed moments, but he's really come on.
Yeah. He was when I do game balls in my game coverage every week of offense, defense, special teams. He was actually my defensive game ball. It was hard to find one on
Good
defense,
one.
but he was the one that I thought really stood out in that game defensively. Yeah, he was pretty solid. We've been talking a lot about what they need in the future, but and we're gonna have to look at the future here soon. But there's still something here for this year. There's still a shot, Matt, and it's the old Dumb and Dumber. So you're telling me there's a chance, right? There's still that shot here. Let's talk about
Yeah.
going forward. This isn't over yet. The in the Big 12. I tweeted this out the other day. Because Buff fans have been kind of like, this is over. The season's over. One more game, and then they won't play in a bowl game and all this stuff. And you know,
How spoiled we get, how
in
quickly it
in a year,
happens.
but I tweeted this out. I'm like, Buff fans, you really think in this wacky Big 12 that this is going to be the first week of the season that goes chalk? I don't think so. I'm expecting. I don't know if enough happens for the Buffs, but look, you beat Oklahoma State on Friday, and then get a couple things to happen. You need Iowa State probably to lose to Kansas State at home. That could happen. You need
Yeah.
Arizona to at home beat Arizona State in the Territorial Cup. I don't think it'll happen, but that's a rivalry game, and you never know. Arizona has the best receiver, arguably in the country. He's up there with Travis, right? And so you never know. The least likely is probably Houston going into Provo and beating the Cougars there. But there's still some things that could happen to where you can still get there. So I don't want to totally move on and just say they're done. It's a nice season, and they'll get to a decent bowl game and then move on. This weekend there's still that opportunity.
For sure. And I think a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about is just watching, back the game and going, okay, well, moving forward, why did this happen? How do you correct it moving forward? Is this sustainable for the future? And by the way, let's just be honest. Anybody who didn't get it and thinks that we're haters, stop listening by now, which is fine. And they already are in
Yeah,
the comments talking about how dumb we are. So I'm not really
yeah,
worried about that. If you're still listening, you appreciate and you understand our perspectives. These are the things that kind of, I mean, let's just call it what it is, right? I mean, let's just call it what it is. So these are the things that have occurred to me where I'm going, okay, yeah, this is learned moving forward. And it's probably stuff that they know inside the building. But now that we have 2 years of a sample size, I think it's like, okay, here's the things I want to make sure we get out there because, at least in my opinion, I think these are what you got to clean up. Now, you're right. There's a chance it could happen. It's very unlikely, but there is a chance it could happen. You need a lot to go your way. And we talked about this in our last video. For Colorado's perspective, none of that other stuff matters. What we say, what you or I say, don't matter. If there's anybody that Coach Prime will be disparaging this week, it's people like you and I who were lauding them and praising them over the last I don't know, couple of months now because they started to believe guys like you and I. And he basically
yeah,
told us that, after the game, not specifically calling us out, but this is part of what we do. So I
yeah,
understand
yeah,
his point. I'm again, and I took not it's I get it. So the point is that they lead off Big 12 play. And for their purposes, all you have to worry about is beating an Oklahoma State team that somehow managed to put up 48 points against Texas Tech. I need to go back and watch that game and how it happened. Ollie Gordon was ripping off runs at about 10 yards plus per carry, a guy who we all had very high expectations for coming into this season, and he's really struggled, as the team has, but he hasn't played well. That's a jarring number considering what Devin Neal just did to this defense. So the physicality breakdowns, the not swarming to the football. I mean, all of that stuff, the not wrapping up, that all has to be buttoned up. And I am glad that they play Friday and lead off because nothing can happen in the Big 12 until they play again. So
right.
if you want to make the Big 12 championship game, all that matters for you is you take care of business and then you sit back with some popcorn on Saturday and you'll figure out what happens there.
Yeah, I will say I haven't watched to see how it happened either, but the two worst defenses in the Big 12 are Oklahoma State and Texas Tech. So
Yeah.
a 54-48 game is probably not too surprising. Texas Tech is last in the conference, giving up 36 points a game. Uh, Oklahoma State gives up 34. The next worst team gives up 30. And so they're both bad defensively. And so that
Yeah.
wasn't too surprising. But to your point, I mean, Ollie Gordon, look, he was the Doak Walker Award winner 1 year ago, right? He's still really, really a good player. And you just gave up 200 yards to Devin Neal. You gave up
Mm-hmm.
almost 200 yards to DJ Giddens earlier this year. Taj Brooks had 137, and I know a lot of it was late. He did a good job on him most of the night. But those are probably the three backs you would look at in this conference and say they're right up there. Gordon's up there with those guys, right? And so the best backs in this conference have put up some nice numbers against Colorado's defense. And so that's why I say they're not a great run defense. So you have to pay attention to Gordon. And Oklahoma State's interesting because they have a true freshman quarterback that got his first start the other day, and was newcomer of the week in the Big 12 this week. And Mike Gundy was talking about him today and saying he was asked, were you surprised by how he played? And he was, yeah, because we didn't know what he would look like until he gets out there. So Now the Buffs have tape on them, and they can maybe adjust to some things, but uh, at least offensively, you got an Oklahoma State team coming in here that is probably going to feel itself a little bit and say, "All right, we just put up 48. Our freshman quarterback played well. We have Ollie Gordon. You know, they've got some weapons."
Yeah, this is just one of those games where if you get on them early, you break their will and their season's over, right? They're 0 and
Right.
8 in conference play. This is, and look, Brian, maybe this is part of the reason why Colorado struggled last week. They were really focused on themselves
Mhm.
and probably not focused enough about what the other team had too. And that probably is a pitfall that I made as well, because I thought it mattered more about what they did, when in reality, Kansas's offensive line, their tight ends, their running backs, and
Mhm.
even Daniels, they proved to be a significant challenge for them defensively. So don't take Oklahoma State lightly, because if there's one thing they will have to play for, guess whose end of year Super Bowl it is for those guys? It's, of course, this game, because
Yeah.
this is your ABC, national spotlight.
Mhm.
Seniors get to make one last impression for the NFL and all this. They're going to be motivated, but this is a team where you just, much like Utah, you got to do the best you can to take the wind out of their sails early. And I did ask Shadeur about, Coach Prime said he didn't really have as big of a problem with the slow starts, because he'll take the 21 points in 19 minutes, which again, I understand. But Shadeur was much more real about it and acknowledged, like, hey, like, yeah, I know I'm the one orchestrating it. We can't get out of the blocks. I understand that. I don't know how they fix it unless they just go drive starters, and instead of the stuff behind the line of scrimmage, focus more on north and south, pepper that other stuff in. But eventually it feels a little bit, and I don't know what you feel like, but their offense has become slightly predictable to me, which I
Yeah.
think isn't a bad thing. There just needs to be a little bit more window dressing, because Colorado has enough talent where even if you know what we're doing, we should still be able to line up and beat you, especially at home, especially against an 0 and 8 team. I have Colorado, and they're a huge favorite. What is the line on this game?
I think it was
They're
16.
huge. I mean, it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a big line.
Yeah.
I
I
don't
will
know
say,
if I would if I'd lay that. An Oklahoma State team that just put up 48, that's a lot of points, Brian.
yeah, but again, it gets a worse defense. The slow starts, I will say this. I don't,
Colorado's defense, by the way, you say that again, they looked like trash on Saturday. So
yeah,
we can say that, but if they play like that, they will
yes,
get 50
but they
put on them
hadn't, but they
again.
hadn't played like that all year, is my point. But,
It's true. It's
and,
true. It's
and,
true.
and the slow starts, I don't worry about that as much. I mean, the three of the four games prior to last week, they came out of the first quarter with 14 points on the board. And so, you know, it's not like they start slow every week. They've had some games recently, even Texas Tech and Saturday were the two that they didn't score in the first quarter, but the other three in the last five games, they've got 14 points on the board at the end of the quarter. So
Yeah.
I don't worry about it as much with them. Um, I feel like they'll figure it out, and I feel like they figured it out on Saturday too. It's just that the defense could never do anything to help you get ahead of things. So I think the defense is going to help them this week. I don't want to say it's a good thing that happened to CU because it's not, but I would be stunned as stunned as I was if they played like that on defense. I'd be absolutely stunned if they played like that 2 weeks in a row. I mean, because
Yeah.
they've been pretty good most of the year. I expect a big bounce back from this defense, and Ollie Gordon might get his yards. I expect a big bounce back from the defense. Honestly,
Yeah, I expect that, but you can't count on it, because I thought that they were way past the point of being able to get beat that badly. I did. I thought that they had graduated, just my opinion. So while I do expect them to have a turnaround, I can't count on that, because as you brought up, they have gotten beaten occasionally by some of the best backs in the conference. And now you're in a position where you got dog walked. Okay. You didn't just
Mhm.
get beat, you gave up 331 yards on the ground. That was embarrassing for a team, as I brought up last week. If you were a college football playoff team, you cover that spread. They didn't. They probably don't deserve to be one. I hate to say it. I think that they can bounce back. They haven't been that team for a long time, for over a month. But the
Yeah.
truth is that team's still capable of coming out. So as Coach Prime brought up, don't get intoxicated with what you've done. I can't bank on past success, because I did, and it just burned them. That's kind of where I'm at. So while I believe in them and it doesn't really change my opinion, they're still, at least in my eyes, going to have to prove to me that you can shake off the fact that you probably blew the chance to win the Big 12 conference. You probably did. You need some help, and you might get it, but you probably did. Can you shake that off mentally and bring it all for the last game that we might ever see Shadeur and Travis play for the Buffs? Like, there's a
Yeah,
lot mentally they'll have to deal with this week that they haven't in the past. So
but
I don't know.
I'm sort of the flip of you in some ways, in that yes, they got embarrassed. I think that's why I'm so confident in this week, is because they got embarrassed. Uh, I don't think they're going to do it again. And I think a point that you made in our previous video, but also today, um, I agree with you. I love the fact that they lead off Big 12 play, because I would not like it if they were, a late game on Saturday night and things have happened to where you now know you don't have a shot at that Big 12 title game. And maybe you could, human nature is take your foot off the gas a little bit because you're not motivated. They get to lead things off to where the first part of the formula beat Oklahoma State. I think they're going to be
Yeah.
motivated as heck to go out there and let's do our part, and then we'll sit back and watch Saturday and see what happens. I fully expect that game on Saturday in Kansas City to be fuel for that defense, because they've been dogs most of the year. I think Cam Stillman Craig is going to be one ticked off guy this week. I think Nikai Hill Green, BJ Green, Levante Bentley, those guys, they are going to be happy coming this week. And I think that they're going to be locked in, focused. And, I think it's going to be a turnaround game for the Buffs after last week. And offensively, I don't worry about them offensively. That defense for Oklahoma State hasn't stopped anybody all year, and they haven't played anybody like this. So I don't know how they're going to stop Colorado, honestly.
Get them to third down. Been a pretty good way to do that the last couple of weeks. They're 8 of
Yeah.
31, 3 straight games. Like, I'm just saying, like, I had to take a step back from the position that I have been on, because I really started to buy into a lot of what they were doing. And then it really kind of showed me a few things. Like, okay, they've been getting by with a couple of things, which isn't bad. You have to be able to do that. But
Yeah.
I've had to recalibrate. So for me, I mean, you're right. All those guys you brought up, all those defensive names, they all should be. Cam played terrible. That was his worst game, maybe as
Yeah.
a Buff, And so, look, I just, it's not that I don't believe that they can do it. It's just there's other extenuating factors that exist here that they didn't before, and so you're still in uncharted territory. And the fact of the matter is I saw that team afterwards. A lot of wind got taken out of their sails, and that is human nature. And these are young men
I
who
think
are
for that
not
night,
completely developed. Okay.
it did.
I hope it does, Brian. I still have CU convincingly here because I think they're just a higher quality football team. And Shadeur and Travis has to put the last, icing on the Heisman Award, and Shadeur is going to come out and end his Buffs career on a great note. I believe that too. But I also think that it's going to be a tougher mental battle to get locked in for this one, in my opinion. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
I still have Colorado probably like 45-28, something like
Yeah.
that, higher scoring game. I do think they'll give up some points though, because I do think they're a little bit more banged up than they probably have been at any point during the year too.
It's funny. We almost have the same type of score, but you and I are very different. And I think it's going to be very easy for them to get locked in to this one. I would be really surprised if they're not locked and loaded and ready to go. And again, you mentioned the third downs, and yes, they haven't been good, yet they still put up 41 and 49 in back-to-back weeks. And they were 3 of 7 the other day, which is not bad. They just
No,
didn't
it's
have
not
very many.
bad.
They didn't have the ball enough for it to be a thing, really. Um, I think it's going to be, I don't want to say an easy game, but I think they blow them out. Oklahoma State has
I
been
did
bad
last
all
week
year.
too. So
I didn't think that last week.
yeah.
I mean, KU was playing well. This
Mhm.
Oklahoma State team has not played well all year. I got Colorado 45, Oklahoma State 20. I think it's
Yeah.
going to be, I think it's going to be one that is put away before the fourth quarter, and they can kind of coast a little bit, and they get to 9-3, and then sit back on Saturday and see what happens. And the great thing is as much as there was this sky is falling feeling, after that game, and it was disappointing. You win this one, and then you go win a bowl game. It's a 10-win season, which is
Oh
pretty
yeah, of
remarkable.
course.
And forget the bowl game at this point, because who knows who plays and all that. If they're 9-3, and you
Come
don't
on.
get to the Big 12, Okay,
Come on.
what a
Yeah.
phenomenal year. And all
Phenomenal.
all credit to Coach Prime and what they've done. And I personally, if they don't get the Big 12 title game, and then this Saturday is it, I take these 2 years with Coach Prime, Shadeur, and Travis. You say, what an unbelievable turnaround, and what an awesome 2 years it's been. So, yeah, I think they get to 9-3 fairly easily today or this week.
Yeah, I mean, the context of what they've done over 2 years is an entirely different discussion. That is unbelievably impressive, and obviously within that context is remarkable. And we're
Yeah,
very, very fortunate to have had that happen here. In no way, shape, or form did I think that before he got hired, that was possible here. And I believe he's the only person in the country that could have done that here.
yeah,
So, I mean, the amount of respect I have for what they've done, it goes without saying. They're just things to clean up moving forward, as there is for every
yep,
program. And I'd like to see them be able to realize their full potential. Trust me, I was among the disappointed crowd on Saturday night because I think this team deserves a chance to be able to realize it. Unfortunately, there's just a little bit more to go, which is why I kept saying they're like right there on the precipice of becoming a great team. They're just not there yet. And that was what Coach Prime, in not so many words, basically was trying to, you know, insinuate to the team afterwards is where do you go from here?
yeah,
Like now you got knocked down. So you can either whine about it, you can complain about it, you can hang your head, or you can show up to play. And I imagine that there's going to be plenty of guys in the locker room that show up to play. The question is the guys who haven't been in a situation like that before, what do you do? And I
yeah,
think as a coaching staff, that is a big part of this week. Like, I think this week for the Buffs, it's a really big test for these players about character. It's not that that's in question. It's just another opportunity for growth. And I
yeah,
think that's what, another one of the reasons Coach Prime was trying to instill that. So if they've got, I'll tell you this, they got the right man at the helm.
yeah. I agree. It's a test. I think they pass it with flying colors. And you look honestly, you
I don't
look
even think
around.
it's that big of a test.
Yeah, and you look around the Big 12. The reason why I'm not discounting this happening is that look, BYU's lost two in a row now. They haven't looked good in either game. I know they're playing Houston, who's not very good, but look, what we're saying about Oklahoma State is why not? This is they got nothing to play. They got nothing to lose here. Houston's in the same boat. Houston, you know that Willie Fritz is getting them fired up, saying you can go ruin their season and be spoiler
Sure.
here. Let's go do it. Iowa State, they haven't been great recently, and arguably could have lost that game. I mean, Cole Becker was a few feet wide on a field goal that would have sent that to overtime, and so Iowa State's not been playing great. They could certainly lose to Kansas State. So there's things that can happen. I think you go into this weekend absolutely keyed up and say, let's go, let's take care of business, and then let the chips fall where they may. I think this team comes out fired up and it has a great game.
I hope so, buddy. I hope so, buddy. I mean,
Well,
I expect nothing less.
yeah,
I mean, that's who they are. My point is that I can't really count on it because I just saw an opportunity for them to do that and they didn't bring it. So they're going to need to prove a little bit of it to me again now that
yeah,
they can't have the mental fortitude to kind of rope it back in. Because if it went the other way, I don't think it would be that big of a surprise to me if they struggled again defensively because I don't know, like human nature can get involved. The one other thing I want to end on this note for at least me, um, after what we've seen out of Shadeur Sanders, if you are an NFL team and you're not sure about your guy, I want in that sweepstakes. I mean, oh my goodness, Brian, I cannot. As much as I've loved to watch him here, I can't wait to watch him play at the next level. He's going to be such a special quarterback. He's going
yeah,
to be one of those guys, and I can't wait to watch it because a lot of people are going to have to eat crow about what they feel about him. There's some stuff he's got to clean up, man, but he's got it. He just has it. You know it when you see it. He's got it. Travis has got it. And another shout out to Travis. I mean, while we're at it, probably can't do that enough because we don't have a ton of more opportunities to watch him. I just found myself on the field just going, oh my God, wow, is this guy good? Just
yeah,
we're gonna miss the hell out of these guys the next couple of years, no matter who else they bring in here, because they are just two really special talents, man.
yeah. And
Now let me ask you, would you retire Travis's number
uh maybe.
with a
I mean,
Heisman Trophy?
basically a two-time All-American and a Heisman Trophy winner. Uh, yeah, probably.
I would.
I wouldn't
How about
retire.
Shadeur?
No.
I probably wouldn't do it because two is a popular, like such a popular number. And I mean, let's be honest, Shadeur probably deserves to have it retired
Well,
based upon Colorado's history books.
look,
But
there's also criteria that they have for retiring numbers,
oh, is
and
there?
yeah, and you've got to
I
be
didn't realize that.
you got to be a consensus All American, which Shador's not going to be. So
Okay,
I don't think they could. But I
so then
wouldn't.
Travis,
Yeah, Travis could be. Um, there's only four that are retired, and two of them are being used right
he,
now, I think. But
is Travis not the best player that's played in this program? I mean, it'd be pretty
yeah,
hard to argue against it.
the only one,
If
and this goes way back, and I know it's generational, it's eras and all that stuff. But what Byron Whizzer White did, was I was actually just looking at it last night. Actually, I was comparing Whizzer White's 1937 season. Okay, he finished second
yeah,
in the Heisman Trophy. Um, Absolutely an East Coast bias back then. That was the second Heisman Trophy ever, was 37. But he leads the country in rushing, scoring, sets NCAA records in rushing and scoring that year. He also played defense, had four interceptions.
wow.
That I think that was the only other time in CU history that somebody had 1,000 yards on offense and made the impact on defense. But he was a rusher. But he was
Well, his
also
name's up there.
yeah, but he was also their quarterback. He was also their punter. He also had four
Travis could
punt.
do all those things.
He could, but he didn't. He's not. He also had four
Yeah,
punt return touchdowns. So yeah, I'm gonna write a story at some point, Matt.
and then he took off his woolen pads,
Yeah.
and his knives for cleats on his shoes, and
Well, look,
that was a long
I think he
time
was
ago.
NFL Rookie of the Year too. But
How
look,
when what year was that?
well, he 38 was when he was in the
Sorry,
NFL.
sorry, what year?
1938.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, okay.
I'm just saying.
The
Obviously,
World War One museum that I went to was still, relevant at that
right.
time. Come on.
My point is, Travis is obviously is Travis more talent. If you put Byron Whizzer White in today's game, you know, there's that whole argument, right? But I'm saying as far
Would
as
you
like,
vote for Travis to be on the marquee?
sure, but I mean,
I know. Was that a yes?
Whizzer White's 1937 season was probably more impressive than what Travis is doing.
Okay, that's fine. It was 1937.
I know
To
that.
do
I'm just saying.
well, my point is I disagree actually because what Travis is doing in today's game with today's athletes, I think is tougher. I mean, these guys were, milking their cows and then
It
playing a
might
game an
be.
hour later.
It might be. I mean, that's why I hate
I
debates
put Travis up
over
there.
generations when you're talking about guys almost 100 years apart, because clearly, like, there's a whole debate of like, well, would Babe Ruth hit all these home runs in today's game? Maybe not,
No,
but who cares? He
no,
was
he's a
phenomenal in that moment.
fat dude shoving hot dogs down his gullet, washing him down
Right.
with beer, and hitting the yarn ball a country mile.
Yes, if you compare Travis directly with him and put him in the same era, would Travis be better? Probably. What Whizzer White was doing compared to his
I get
peers
it. No, I get it.
back then was equally, if not more so impressive than what Travis is doing. And so that's all I'm saying is like, and I'm trying to praise Travis in that what he's doing right now is one of the best seasons we've ever seen at the University of Colorado,
So
and
shouldn't
it's
that go on the
arguably the
marquee?
best.
So shouldn't that go on the marquee?
What do you mean by the marquee, though?
Shouldn't he have 12 up there next to White and the rest of them?
Oh yeah, one of the retired numbers. Yeah, I
Yeah.
already said that. Like,
Oh, I'm sorry. That was what I was asking you. That was all. That was
yeah,
all I was asking you.
if
Would you
he's
put 12 up there?
he was an All-American last year, he'll be an All-American this year, and the
That
Heisman
was
Trophy
all I was
winner. So
asking.
yeah, certainly.
That's it.
I was just bringing up
That's it.
another debate of like,
Oh, I love
you
that.
know,
Yeah, I mean, you and I mean, it's
yeah.
1938. So I mean, we'd have to go get Peggy, and you'd have to go back to Peggy's house and do another piece.
Which real quick,
I
no, I don't have to go back because I'm gonna tell you this. When I went to her house a couple weeks ago and I sat down with her, visit with her for an hour and a half, right? And
yeah,
she had told me before a few years ago when I talked to her that she grew up listening to Whizzer White on the radio and K.O. Lamb, who was also doing things like this right before Whizzer White. But I asked her, I said, "All right, you listen to Whizzer White, you're seeing Travis Hunter, who's better?" And she goes, "Oh, don't ask me that." So I did ask her that, but
how old was she when Whizzer White was playing?
well, she's 100 now, and Whizzer White played Well, she would have been
So
like
like
15 years
15. She was
old.
a teenager.
Yeah. So, well, she was born in 1924. Whizzer White in his 37th season, she would have been like 13 years old. So, uh, she didn't watch him.
Shout
She
out
listened,
Peg.
she listened to him on the radio. But how awesome is it that your CU fandom has spanned Whizzer White to Travis Hunter? I mean,
Just
come
her
on, man.
life, like the fact that she has it together like she does at 100 is
Yeah.
I've
Oh,
never
she's
seen it. She might be the most coherent 100-year-old there's ever been.
well. Let me
Like
just tell
it
you,
is remarkable.
I visited with her for an hour and a half. She was sharp as a tack from start to finish. And the only reason I left was because I'm like I had to say, Peggy, I have to go because I got to go pick up my kids. She would have sat there and talked forever. I mean, I loved it. She was awesome to visit with, and but yeah, she's phenomenal. And I mean, look, that press conference last week, um, she was asked, "What's the best game you've seen?" And she's like, "Oh, so many." She rattles off 4 or 5 off the top of her head. There were
I
like
can't remember what I did yesterday.
right.
It's
So
remarkable.
so yeah.
Yeah.
So my only so going back again, I'm just
Yeah.
saying, Whizzer White's been the gold standard in this program in my mind forever. The fact that Travis Hunter is in this conversation as having a Whizzer White type of season says a lot about Travis Hunter because we haven't seen it.
And I think my point is at the bye week next year of whichever team he's playing for, if it coincides with a home game, he should come back to Folsom so he can get the 12 put up on the side of it because he deserves it. As I'm watching him week in and week out, there is never a moment I take it for granted. Not
Right.
one. Because we've been so lucky here in Colorado to witness some true greatness in sports. I think of Peyton Manning. I think of the current generation we're in with Nicola and, with Kale and McKinnon and Rantanen. I mean, you got Hall of Famers all over the map here right
Mhm.
now. So greatness when you see it. And I wasn't sure that we would ever see that type of greatness with a CU jersey on ever after 2022. And
Yeah.
so I think it's worth honoring. And as you brought up, if he goes back to back consensus APs and wins a Heisman Trophy, we better be seeing 12 put up on the side of Folsom Field next year. All I'm
Yeah.
saying.
I, I will say, there might be a time thing as far as like a lot of Hall of Fames are. It might be a
Screw it.
number of years, but it'll be
I
up there at
don't
some
care.
point. It doesn't matter when it goes up there. It'll be up there at some
They
point.
guess who makes those rules? They do. Guess who could change those rules? They can. I've always thought teams like the
I'm just
Broncos are
saying
the
it.
same way. I
The
get
Bron
it.
well, the
Screw
Broncos
the
did it.
rules.
The Broncos did it with Elway. They were like, screw it. Next year we're doing it.
Screw it.
But and I'll say
Travis
this
freaking
last
Hunter.
thing before we get out of here. When
Yeah.
Laviska was here a few years ago, I agree with you. Like, I didn't think we'd see it in the CU uniform again. When Laviska was here, I was like, this is the best player I've covered. I'm not sure I'll ever have this
Yeah.
chance again. And the fact that this guy makes me forget about Laviska is like, I mean, because Laviska, over the previous
Special.
13 years
Special.
before Travis Hunter got here that I covered this team, there was nobody like Laviska Shenault.
Nope.
And now it's
Nope.
like Travis Hunter is like, I
Travis is
mean, twice
unbelievable.
the player because he plays both sides of the ball, but like,
Just unbelievable.
he's phenomenal. Shadeur
How many
Sanders
snaps
is,
do you have it off the top of how many snaps he played on Saturday? I don't know.
I don't, but I mean, they only had 42 snaps on offense. So, um,
Yeah. See, I mean, he was out there for every one of them defensively.
yeah, I can look it up while we're talking, but
Yeah, just curious because he was over. I mean, what did Curtis put out there? He was up close to 1,200 entering the game
yeah,
already.
something like that.
I mean, he's got to be pushing, 1,350 or something like that by now.
According to
It's
PFF,
just
there were 80 snaps on defense, and he played 79 of them. And so PFF counts like penalty
penalties.
penalty
Yeah.
snaps. So
So do
uh,
I.
what's that?
I'm saying so do I.
Okay,
It's not like
so
that never happened. You know what
they
I mean?
technically had 42 snaps on offense, but there was actually 46, and he played all 46. So between offense and defense, he missed one snap. So that's 100,
So
125 out of 126.
God bless this kid. I mean,
The
he
the
is
only other
just
guys that
something
played every
else.
snap on offense were Cash Cleveland, Jordan Seaton, and Shadeur Sanders.
Travis is he's 1-1, man. I mean, we were just so lucky
So
that we got to watch him up close for 2 years, and we deserve to honor him with his number on the wall. Kind of what I
and
wanted to say.
yeah, and obviously I think it will be. I just don't know if it'll be quite yet. I don't think he didn't do any special team snaps. He usually does. Of course, a lot of that could be when he's on.
What a slacker. Lace, should we take his Heisman
Well,
away?
but I think a lot of that sometimes is when he's on the punt return coverage, which did not get on the field the other day. So that makes sense as to why he wouldn't be
Yeah.
on there. So, but 125 out of 126 snaps per PFF. So anyway, let's get out of here.
Both of us have a big Oklahoma. Both of us have a big Oklahoma State win. Both of us unbelievably and overwhelmingly impressed with where the program has come in just 2 years. And, really, really, I feel I could speak for you, grateful that we've had the opportunity to be around it because it's been
Yeah.
a lot of fun.
And to correct what you said, a big win over Oklahoma State, not a big Oklahoma State win.
Thank you. Clearly, I think we all understood what I meant.
Yeah.
That means the pod's gone on too long.
For anybody that just happens to watch the last minute of this, that's what we meant. So,
yeah.
Matt, it's Turkey Week. I'll see you this week. At all the press
happy Thanksgiving, buddy.
And,
I'm
happy
thankful
Thanksgiving
for
to
you.
you. Thankful for you. And I'll have
I'm
a chance
thankful
to
for
tell
you,
that.
listener.
Yes, I'm thankful for listeners as well. And Matt, we'll have a chance to say thank you for each other over the next couple of days. So I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, buddy.